All right. Jane Duncan Rogers, thank you so much for being on In the Trenches.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
Yeah. So, quick backstory. Obviously, we go way back in the online world. It feels like generations almost, but I know it's not that. But it was probably about 10 years ago, I want to say.
It was 8 years ago,
8 years ago.
almost
Yeah.
exactly. No,
Yeah.
maybe a bit longer than that. That I was actually working with you. That's true. It was
Yes.
8 years ago that. Oh my God. Right. Okay.
That's
That
why I have to
everything
do these kind of
started.
broad brush strokes for me because I'm like, I know ish, but you're right.
Yeah.
Probably about 8 years ago, give or take.
Actually, as you're saying that, it's 8 years ago that I officially started the company. But it was longer than that when I first published the book and when I was working with you to get clear about what the book should be and how I would get it out there. And oh my God, I mean, without that, none of this would have happened, actually. Let's just be honest. Because, I
Yeah.
learned so much from you about what to do to get a self-published book out there. And without that, it just wouldn't have happened in the way that it did. Although I must say it wasn't as I planned it.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, so take me back. So what's so interesting is obviously you posted on Facebook recently after I just said we just did our first ever kind of 3-day live event for authors and you post a message. I didn't solicit it, didn't pay for it. I really appreciate it though. It was really cool to hear. I love hearing those kind of stories, those kind of updates from
Yeah.
students, from clients, from people I've worked with, the authors I worked with. And yours mentioned that, again, that we had worked together all those years ago. And now, of course, you have this business and you just mentioned me offline, which we'll get to in a second, I'm sure, that you're even stepping back from running the business, the day-to-day operation. So it's obviously pretty significant. So before we get there, I know that's the journey we're going to go on, but take me back to the beginning there. Like you said, it was different than you expected. So tell me about what, if you can go back to your mindset back all those
Yeah.
years ago with the intention of writing your first book, I guess, what did you expect it to be and what did it turn out to be?
Well, I knew my husband had died in 2011, and I knew at the time, because I had been blogging as a business coach, I knew I would need to write about it. And I trusted that I would know when the time was right because, I was in grief. I wasn't going to be writing anytime soon. As it was, I started writing the book about maybe a couple of years after that. And as I was writing it, I got to the point where I realized, oh my goodness, I have to get this out there in the best possible way to do justice to our relationship and to him and to the writing. And so I don't know, I can't remember how I first found you and your program at the time, but the program was perfect. It was like, get your self-published book out there, which is exactly what I needed to do. So I must have been still writing it and was going through maybe the editing process and at the same time learning about the marketing and all the stuff that I had to do on Facebook and creating groups and interacting with people and all that stuff, how to get it an Amazon bestseller and all that, which it was, of course, seeing as I've been taught what to do. And it was published in August of 2015, I think it was, no, September 2015, Gifted by Grief, a true story of cancer, loss and rebirth. So it was a very personal memoir. Now, and I'm talking about I'm writing about, and I write as I speak. Okay. So what you hear now is what you actually read on the page, but I was writing about everything that had led up to Philip dying and then what happened afterwards for me. And for me, it was kind of cathartic doing that because it was quite an emotional journey writing it. But it was good as well because such a lot of amazing things had come out of Philip dying, which led me to say in the end of the book that I was grateful for both his life and his death, which is quite something to say. Anyway, I thought that readers would be interested in the kind of spiritual insights and all that kind of stuff, the things that had happened to me. But they landed on one particular chapter, and the chapter was when I had written about the questions that I'd asked my husband before he died. So at this stage, we knew that he only had a few months to live. And somebody emailed me, a good friend emailed me with a list of these questions. And they were things like, what kind of coffin do you want? And how do you want your body dressed? And what are your passwords? Really practical things. And I really didn't want to look at it. She sent the email 3 times. And eventually we sat up in bed one day, one Saturday morning with the laptop, and we answered it all. And that's what I wrote about in this chapter. So after about a week of about 10 people, one after another, telling me, I need to do these questions too, I thought, okay, I'll put on a workshop then.
Yeah.
And I knew how to do workshops. That was my background, training and working with, coaching with people. So I put it on and it sold out and had a waiting list. Now, that's unusual where I live because I live in the north of Scotland and there's not very many people here. And that's really how the business started, because it was just me. I carried on doing workshops. I started seeing people one-to-one for this particular kind of thing. And in the 2nd of November 2016, we incorporated as a social enterprise, a not-for-profit company. And that's where it began properly.
Wow. Well, just to point out that piece right there, it's interesting because it's one of those things where I imagine it's very uncomfortable for people. Like, it's like, these are the last questions I want to be asking. I don't want to deal with this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
But then you get to a point probably where you need to.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but since probably most of us have never been through such a process, the need comes from somebody who has the wisdom, who has been through it. That's kind of where you come in.
Yeah, exactly. And I knew early on that this was clearly it was a passion project. It's not absolutely not the thing to do if you want to make money fast or sell anything easily to anyone, because there's a whole education piece that has to happen, because people don't realize about what is going to happen if they're not prepared in advance, if they haven't planned ahead for the inevitable. And even actually now with COVID, still it is better now. It's much better. But in those days, so 2016, it was like end of life planning was not a search term. I was advised not to put the word death on any of my books or any of my products, because it would, hamper sales. Yeah. It's different now, but it wasn't then. And it was just like, so I knew that I had to have another source of income for a start. As a business, always a good idea when you've got a new project starting, which I did have, because I was still coaching as a small business coach, and that it would take time. And I had to do this kind of like drip, drip, drip educational thing. And I did lots of that, and we still do that actually, because people need it. Because you never know when somebody's going to go, oh my goodness, I need to attend to this now.
Yeah, right.
So that's what we did.
Yeah. And it sounds like, again, it just sounds like from the heart, it was meaningful work you were doing.
Oh, yeah.
Driven by that. Like, just like you said, it's like, I mean, I'm excited to talk a little bit about kind of now where it's at and kind of the bigger impact and scale that you're at. But even that, like, to get something like that started, it wouldn't be the first market I would step into. It wouldn't be something like I would try to, like, let's monetize this. Like, no.
No, like, I definitely don't recommend it. Yeah. From that point of view, I do not recommend it, because there've been many times when I thought, oh my God, why couldn't I have chosen something that people actually want, like food or toilet rolls or something? But, that's not what drove me. What drove me was people's initial response. When looking back now, I see that I was already well known in our community, and quite a lot of people in our community were an older age, let's say. So I was 58 when I wrote the book, and I knew that, 58, okay. And I knew by now, because my husband had died, that actually it's going to happen. It could happen to me too. So when I started up the company, Before I Go Solutions, I did it with the intention that I probably wouldn't want to be doing it within another 10 years or so. And so it had to be set up in a certain way so that somebody else could take it on, because I wanted to leave a legacy, especially as we didn't have children. So, what was I going to be leaving behind,
Yeah.
That would contribute to the world. So I carried on, kind of these two things, me doing my personal coaching and also doing this at the same time. And then people came to me again and said, can I train in this? By this time we had an online course, the Before I Go method. Yeah. So that was a way of people being able to do it online if they wanted to. And that's how I discovered that if you don't have a live element in your online courses, then people are probably not going to finish them. They might get started, but are probably not going to finish. But that was okay, because I like doing training online. That's not a problem. But people asked, could they train in this? Could they train to teach others how to get this stuff done? And so I had already previously had this experience in my past. So I brought my plans forward by a year, and that then began the Before I Go End of Life Plan Facilitators training, which is how we have most worked up until now. I produced another book, Before I Go, The Essential Guide to Creating a Good End of Life Plan. Now, interesting, I didn't do this self-published. I met somebody who worked as an editor with a publishing company. And anyway, long story short, it got taken up by a publisher. And while on the one hand, it's been great, I didn't have to put any money behind it, which I did have for the first one. I didn't realize the lack of control I would have. So, for example, I have not been able to tie that particular book in with any particular marketing campaign.
Mm.
And that's been really frustrating, really frustrating. So I don't know that I would do that another time. And it was really nice. It was really nice for my ego to be stroked by the fact that a publisher wanted me. And it has been quite a good seller in the bigger scheme of things. But it's not a way, that's not another way to make money, I can tell you.
Yeah.
So yeah, another time. And there will be another time because I'm hoping to write more. It will be self-published. So what did we do? And then we also produced a workbook for people to complete. And we now have an end-of-life planning card deck as well. So that's another way to engage with this kind of stuff. So quite a lot of products, a few other bits and pieces on the website as well. But for the most part, we've been bringing in most people to train as end-of-life plan facilitators, keeping the numbers small because this is quite a delicate topic, I would say, you know. So yes, we have grown and we have become a 6-figure business, which is great because that was my aim. It's not a huge, big one, but it's a healthy one. That makes me feel very proud.
And so who are your typical clientele? Then you mentioned end of life. Like, so are these therapists typically? Are they like in medical professionals? Like, who are you? Who are coming to you typically?
This has been one of the other problems. It's like, you know, the market actually, because everybody's going to die, is available for everybody. But of course, we all know as marketers that that's not a good idea. You have to have a much more niche market. So for the facilitators training, the people tend to be either have a background in nursing, be a health professional of some kind. It could be in the complementary field, coaches, counselors, later life lawyers, financial advisors, that sort of person. And believe it or not, most of those people still haven't done their own end-of-life plan, which, by the way, is a whole lot more than just the legals, which is what people know about, or they think about estate planning, but actually there's lots more to it than that. So that's the market for the training. The market that we've gone to for just getting your end-of-life plan done is the older market. So people probably 65 plus who, you know, probably realize that actually they've got less time to live than they have already lived. And need to do something about this. And usually those people have had some kind of a brush with death, i.e. somebody that they know has died and they've seen the mess that is left behind from an administrative point of view. And, you know, I always say to people, don't think you are going to die. One day you're going to die. That's just the way it is. You know, we can't have life without death and vice versa. But it's much easier to think about the impact this kind of stuff has if you think about, if I had died yesterday, what would be happening from an administrative point of view? You know, I mean, all you have to do in the face of that question is look around your room and all the stuff. I'm looking around my room right now and there's loads of stuff. Now, because, of course, I'm somebody who thinks that I can't possibly teach this without being full of integrity myself, I know what's going to happen to it all. You know, I get left instructions, general instructions, because I hope I'm not going to die anytime soon. But yeah, I think that defining the market was difficult and it's still quite a challenge. Although there are, you know, I think you have kids, don't you? Underage kids?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So really important market here is people with underage kids who haven't yet done a will and specified who would look after their children if both parents happen to die. I mean, it's unlikely, but it does happen. So anyway, I'm not going to ask you what you've done, Tom, but I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. So it's like, that's why I'm kind of curious. I was going to ask, like, is this something that is driven by like typically the individual who maybe say had that brush or something, you know, something woke them up, or is it typically maybe like a spouse or something like that too?
Yeah.
Like, or is it kind of a mix? And then, I got some more questions too. But.
Okay, no, that's great. I love questions. You know, it can be either the adult children with parents who are aging and they can see what is happening and maybe they're like, for example, there was one woman, her name is Audrey. This is in one of our early courses. She came, it was an in-person course before COVID. And she turned up one night and she was in tears because she didn't know. She was looking after her parents, caring for them both. And she didn't know if they had a will. She didn't know anything else, but she certainly didn't even know if they had a will. And she was terrified of speaking to them because she didn't want them to think that, you know, she was wanting to bump them off or whatever. So we were speaking to her and giving her, good ways to be able to broach the subject. And she promised that she would do it. And she came back. She was in tears, though, because she was really frightened. But she came back the following week with a big smile on her face because she had plucked up the courage. She'd done it in the way that we had suggested. And the parents, it was wonderful. The parents breathed a huge sigh of relief because they had been wondering about how to broach the subject with their daughter. Now, that happens more often than not. Yeah. So it does take courage. One person has to have some courage to broach this subject, whether it's from the older parent of the adult children or the other way around. That's the way it usually happens. But it could be friends as well. And it could be friends. It can be anything. But it's usually a mix of those two things happening. It dawns on people, actually, there's something that at the very least we need to know about is there a will and what it actually says.
Right. Which is kind of the legal question I think you were kind of alluding to, that a lot of people, although not many people even do that, will say, or there's a large group maybe that don't even have that. But it sounds like those that do go down that path, usually, like maybe at most they're taking the box on the legal aspect of things like a will. Walk me through, talk to me about what else do you recommend, or what is your program like? How do you walk people through that? And do you have other components then outside of making sure your legal boxes are checked?
Yeah, we do. So for example, well, obviously there's the funeral organization. Now, just think about it. We spend years sometimes planning a wedding, and certainly months planning maybe a baby christening or something like that, name celebration, but we expect people to be able to organize a funeral within a matter of days. Yeah. Now, there's quite a lot to organizing something like that. So it's really helpful if you've thought it through beforehand and have ideally talked about it and got what you want written down. I say it's really important to get this stuff written down because you don't realize what happens with grief. When you're in the midst of grief, you are often not thinking straight. And if you have to make decisions, that can be really difficult because actually there's only one thing that you really want when somebody has died, if you've loved them, is that you want them to come back and be healthy. You don't care about anything else. So the more that you can do to make that time easier for that person, the better. So we go into the details of what you would want in your funeral at the moment. If you're thinking about, okay, this happened to me yesterday, this is what I will want, you can always change it. Of course, really good idea to keep it updated. There's also your digital legacy. What are you going to be leaving behind digitally? Because these days, if you don't take care of what you want to have happen after you have died online, then you will still be alive online. That can be a good thing or not such a good thing, because do you really want people to discover that you've died through some sort of post
that
hasn't been very consciously done? Or do you want, maybe, for example, when my husband died, Facebook was the thing for younger people. Now, he had a page. It wasn't very well populated. I just got it taken down by somebody else, which fortunately they knew what to do. But he had his 16-year-old granddaughter. She died 3 months after he had died. It was a real tragedy. She also had cancer. Now, she had a very active Facebook page, and her father decided to keep that up for a year or so to act as a memorial page. Now, this is all sorted now in Facebook. In those days, it wasn't. And it was beautiful because people could come to that page and they could remember her and think of her. So there's some conscious decisions to be made here about your presence online, whether it's social media or just the various accounts that you have. And sometimes these days people are appointing digital executors. So that would be somebody different maybe from the executor of the will, preferably somebody who's happy being online and knows about tech and stuff like that. And then there's also what I call your living legacy. How do you want to be remembered? There's lots and lots of new initiatives now that will help you be remembered in the way that you want to be remembered. Not everybody cares about that, but it's something to make a conscious decision about. And then there's a few other bits and pieces, but one of the other things is, with an aging population that is not necessarily staying healthy, you have to think about, okay, well, if I wasn't able to speak for myself, so maybe I'd had a stroke or I was in a coma for some reason, or an accident, or fell and hit my head or something, and I couldn't say what I wanted, then how do I know I'm going to get what I want? So that's like a living will. some people might know it as that. It's also known as an advanced healthcare directive, or an advanced decision. Same sort of thing. It's about thinking about what you want to have if you were in that kind of situation. It only comes into play if you can't speak for yourself. And it's not really nice to think about, I have to say. That's why it's a lot easier to do with a whole lot of other people, or with somebody else helping you. But it is really helpful to your power of attorney. And the power of attorney, of course, is one of the other legal documents that you need. Somebody who can speak for you on your behalf if you can't or don't want to for whatever reason. So that's quite a lot of information I've given you all in one go there, Tom. But
Yeah. No, I mean, it's important. I'm curious too, do you also help people with like, so after the fact too, like, so this is all preemptive. It's all like, which is obviously incredibly important. But then also does your nonprofit also help people with like, just, I guess, dealing with the tragedy after the fact?
no, we don't do that. But there are plenty of people who do, plenty of people who are out there dealing with, well, now there are, who will help you manage the estate of the person who has died. And of course, plenty of people who will help you deal with the grief, the emotional effects of the grief. No, we just focus on beforehand, which is really, so the educational bit is about getting people to think about this well before it's really needed, so that when it is needed, it's there.
Yeah. Which is that is the tough, from a business, I guess, perspective or a marketing perspective. That's the hardest thing right there. But that makes it very challenging. So so now you have this organization now, and it sounds like you're going to be stepping back from the day to day. What does that mean? What is next then for you, and what is next then for this organization? Do you have plans to like expand? It sounds like you might have another book in you. I'm just curious, like where you're headed with all this.
Yeah, well, in this process, I discovered that, actually running the company was not my most favorite thing. And, what I like to write, and I was writing, but it was mostly marketing stuff, which it wasn't floating my boat. And I realized that actually I just needed to take a different role. So we have 2 new people coming on board, so that that will allow me to step back and do things that only the founder can do, or things that, like this conversation, is perfect for me. Nobody else could do this particular kind of conversation. So, but what it's going to give me from next year onwards is more time to actually write. And so this time around, I'm thinking, well, I like doing new things, right? So I've never written a novel before. So I thought, I think I'm going to write a novel. Of course, it will have death in it somewhere. But it'll be I don't know, it's not going to be like the usual crime stuff. It's not what floats my boat. I don't know exactly how it'll be yet, but I'm looking forward to giving myself a bit of space and time so that the inspiration can come through easily. Yeah.
Yes. And then what are your plans or goals for Before I Go Solutions too? Is there something that I guess the organization itself is, in terms of like mission or goal or objective, like that you all are trying to achieve here?
Yeah, well, the mission has always been to have end-of-life plans be as commonplace as birth plans, so that it's a normal and natural thing. Now, we've done a lot of work, but it's been quite at a low level. We haven't reached huge numbers, but the new people have background in the corporate market, and they have lots of contacts there. And if we can get this stuff into companies where people are beginning to think about it in relationship to their work, in relationship to their pension, in relationship to their family, then we start to talk about, really affecting thousands. And that's what we need to do. Yeah. So I'm delighted about it. Absolutely delighted.
Well, it's interesting because I have a client who works in like kind of the longevity space. And, just it's interesting right now because we're seeing like this boom of, again, the older generation here, and now more than ever. And like, there's a term for it, I'm sure. There's like a big trend that everybody's already perceiving the market, but that it will come. It's going to be hitting if it's not hitting already. But now through the next 20 years, it's like, I will say like, there's always opportunities. It is an opportunity, but it's just a huge need is what's there. Yeah. And that's what creates the opportunity, because there's just more people now at these older ages who are needing more care and more help than ever before in the history of mankind, really. All these things are kind of coming to the head. So I find it fascinating being a little bit in that space right now and seeing it, because I'm like, it's fascinating because there's all these things that are needed. And there really aren't, like, there are some, like, you think, I guess that there might be some generic solutions already out there. Or there's like certain things that are kind of already in place. But 1, I don't know if those systems are robust enough. And 2, I don't think they cover the gamut of all the needs that are out there. So it's very fascinating space to be in.
Yeah.
Just from a cultural perspective right now.
Absolutely. I mean, these next 10, 20 years are going to be instrumental in how we deal with older age, later life people, and the systems that are going to have to be put into place or are going to be shown up to be not in place. So, you know, it's definitely, if you like it, to call it this, a growing market. And I could see that really early on. And I realized in this process that I've always been a pioneer. I like to be in at the beginning of things, and then I want to go off and do something else. That's why I want to write a novel, because I've never done that before.
Excellent.
But it will still be an educational novel. I'll bet you there'll be messages in there somewhere. Because it's at heart, I think I'm a teacher, you know. But you're absolutely right. It's like we've already seen, I've seen in the last 8 years or so, but particularly the effect of COVID, all sorts of new initiatives happening. It's very exciting. I find it very exciting. Anyway, it's like, you know, and I'm somebody I'm not interested in competition. I'm interested in collaboration. And at this level, this is a cultural change that has to happen. So we all need to be coming together and thinking about it and about what is needed and doing something in our own little way, in our own environment, whether that be online or offline, to contribute. Yeah.
And so I guess that's a great segue here. Where's the best place for people to find you, connect with you, get your books, or even work with your organization?
Yeah, well, the website is beforeigosolutions.com. It's got everything there. There's a shop there with all the products that you can, goes from £7 up to the training, which is a couple of thousand. Then if you want to be, I'm on Facebook still, but Facebook is very good for our age market. You probably won't find me on much other social media. But yeah, the website is probably the best place to go. And there's freebie stuff there so that you can get a taste of what it is that we're talking about if you're interested.
And the listeners can find your books there too, right?
They're on Amazon. You can't get the card pack on Amazon yet. And the workbook, you have to get those through our website. But the 2 books, Gifted by Grief and Before I Go, they're on Amazon and all the other places that you would expect them to be on. So
awesome. Well, Jane, thank you so much for being on In the Trenches. I appreciate you sharing your story, taking your time with us today, just telling us a little bit more about yourself and kind of where you've been and where you're going. And I appreciate you. It's been great knowing you, working together all over all these years and just seeing the update. I love it. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been great.
Thank you, Jane. And that wraps up another broadcast of In the Trenches. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating review. Just go to tommorkes.com/iTunes, and that'll take you to iTunes where you can leave a 5-star rating review. And that really helps spread the word about this podcast. And finally, if you need help growing your online business or generating new traffic, leads, and sales at a profit, reach out to me at tom@tommorkes.com or head over to the website tommorkes.com and sign up for the free newsletter. That's it for today. Stay frosty.